for All Things Money with David Blain, a discussion about your money, including everything from investing and taxes to real estate. Now with this week's program from D.L. Blain Company in New Bern, here's David Blain.
Hello and welcome to All Things Money. My name is David Blain, and during today's show we're going to be talking about some interesting financial topics. As I record this on Election Day, I'm sure many of you out there are doing your patriotic duty and casting your ballots. Well, we're going to cover another interesting topic that has kind of been swept under the rug recently, but the Federal Reserve is starting a two-day meeting this week as well. And so with all the focus on the political aspects, I thought I would reorient your focus a little bit to something other topics that are very important going on this week. But before we get into that, let me, as always, give our phone number, which is 252-633-0107. Our email is allthingsmoney@dlblain.com. That's allthingsmoney@dlblain.com. And our website is www.dlblain.com, and there you'll find information about myself, my firm, as well as archived copies of the show. As I mentioned in the opening, we're going to be talking about the Federal Reserve today, with election and all the political ramifications that it has. It certainly has a big impact on your finances. We try to leave the political component of this to the other talk shows and focus on the monetary. So there's a lot of important things coming out of this election to do with the economy and taxes and government spending. But there's another interesting thing happening in Washington this week, and the Federal Reserve is beginning a two-day meeting on what to do about the economy. And the Federal Reserve, I'm going to take most of today's show and try to explain what the Federal Reserve is, how it works. It's very important that citizens understand how it works. The Federal Reserve has enormous power in our economy and in the daily lives of people, maybe not in a direct way, but certainly in an indirect way. They hold an enormous amount of power. You may have heard of Alan Greenspan and Ben Bernanke. They have been the two chairmen of the Federal Reserve, the past two chairmen. Their names are in the press a lot. You see their pictures on TV a lot. These are very important people, and most people really don't understand how the Federal Reserve works. So we thought we would take a few minutes today and talk about, number one, what their meeting is about, what they're going to be discussing. Number two, what exactly is the Federal Reserve, and some other things. So first of all, the Federal Reserve, informally known as the Fed. You may have heard of the Fed. Well, it's actually the Federal Reserve System. Was created in 1913, largely out of response to a financial panic of 1907. And it's kind of changed since then. Of course, the Great Depression led to changes in the system. But its duties officially are to conduct the nation's monetary policy, supervise and regulate banking institutions, maintain the stability of the financial system, and provide financial services to depository institutions, the U.S. government, and foreign official institutions. So, in essence, it's sort of it's a national bank. Their two mandates from Congress are to keep inflation at an appropriate rate and to maintain the economy at the economic growth and unemployment, to help manage unemployment. So those are the two mandates, employment and inflation. And we'll talk a little bit about that later, how that dual mandate sometimes is a conflict. But the structure of the Federal Reserve, there's a board of governors and the Federal Open Market Committee. There's 12 regional banks located in major cities throughout the country and numerous other private U.S. member banks. And the Open Market Committee is responsible for setting monetary policy and consists of 7 members of the Board of Governors and the 12 bank presidents. The resulting structure is very unique in that it's that the outside agency, the Department of the Treasury, actually creates the currency that is used in the Federal Reserve and our monetary system. So it's split. Some of the responsibilities are with Treasury, some of them with the Fed. And the Federal Reserve is independent within the government because its decisions do not have to be ratified by the President or anyone else in the executive or legislative branch. However, its authority is derived from the U.S. government. And the Board of Governors are chosen by the President and confirmed by Congress. The Federal Reserve, it's kind of a unique in that it's actually composed of member banks. So banks are members of the Federal Reserve, but it receives its mandate from Congress. So it's a hybrid of a public and private system. The U.S. government receives all the system's annual profits after a dividend of 6% on a member bank capital investment is paid and an account surplus is maintained. So the banks that put in money to the Federal Reserve receive a dividend of 6%, and then the federal government receives any profits afterwards. There has been calls recently to audit the Fed and some other things. And the history of central banking goes all the way back to Thomas Jefferson, who was an ardent, he was vehemently against a central bank and some of the banking functions. Now, the parallels are very similar, but you have to understand back in colonial times it was a little bit different. There was no central bank like the Fed. It was, the government was the issuer of money. But this is a great quote from Thomas Jefferson. He says, "If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their money, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them, the banks, will deprive the people of their property until their children will wake up homeless on the continent that their fathers conquered." And so that's a pretty strong rebuke of central banking. And our Federal Reserve has had its criticisms over the years. Virtually every developed country around the world uses some sort of central bank. I don't know what the solution, the solution of this is not. We're not going to discuss that today. But there's a lot of criticism of the central bank, and there's certainly a lot of improvements that could be made to the system. But I just wanted to read that because our founding fathers warned against some of the perils of the central banking system and investing too much control into the central bank as the Fed has. So the Fed is going to start meeting today and tomorrow on this 2-day meeting. And when we come back after the break, I'll get into exactly what they're going to be discussing and some of the possible outcomes. So for All Things Money, this is David Blain. We'll be right back after a short break.